It says the consecration of Ayodhya temple Ram Mandir was previously described in your interview as a sociological change rather than a political one. Could you please elaborate on this theory as it represents an expansion of sociological possibility rather than a political possibility?
You may remember back in February there was a lot of discussion of India entering a new era of a Ram Raja, a government in the spirit of Lord Ram, and according to the principles embraced by Lord Ram. And there's also a lot of talk about the Bhagavad Gita and India representing the principles of the Bhagavad Gita in its political constitution. I don't mean the literal written constitution, I mean in the political structures of the country. And that really is about what India means as a nation, which is distinct from what India means as a state. The state is what we elect people to represent us in the state institutions, and they control the levers of power at the state. That's different from what constitutes a nation. And really what the Ram Mandir Consecration, the big effect it had was on Indians' sense of what constituted the Indian nation. I think Narendra Modi, who participated directly in the consecration, was very careful to say that the Ram Mandir was not only for Hindus, but it was to give direction or give a sense, give a moral compass to all Indians of whatever faith whatever faith they were. Now, it's not for me to decide whether that's right or wrong, appropriate or inappropriate, whether people want to accept Ram as a guiding figure or they don't want to accept him. That's for Indians to decide. For me as a social scientist, the interesting fact is that it's a claim about what constitutes the Indian nation and the principles on which the Indian nation will be formed. It says nothing about the government of India. The government of India remains completely secular. The government of India is governed by the Indian Constitution. There's no religious foundation for India's state institutions. But of course, state institutions don't exist in a vacuum. They exist within a national context. Indian state institutions will differ in character from Indonesian state institutions because Indonesia's state institutions are informed by the almost nationwide infusion of Islam in the country, so that although its state institutions may be secular, and there's some question about that today, there's been some compromises around the secularity of Indonesian state institutions, but although its state institutions may be secular, the nation itself is a highly Muslim nation. Or perhaps a better example, Japan is a syncretic Buddhist and Shinto nation. Japan's state institutions are entirely secular. There's no vestige of Buddhist or Shinto ceremony in Japan's state institutions. Yet the nation, the spirit of the nation, is strongly informed by Buddhist and Shinto beliefs about how people should behave in public life. So the Ram Mandir was really, the consecration ceremony was really about how Indians should behave in public life, at least one vision, let's face it, the BJP's vision, or more broadly, the RSS's vision of how Indians should behave in public life. But that's a vision that is widely shared by many in India, and not only by Hindus. I mean, there are many Hindus who object to that vision, and there are at least some Muslims and Christians who embrace that vision and who think of it as a noble vision for India, even if it's not drawn from their particular religious experience. But I insisted at the time that the Ram Mandir had very little political importance, and in fact, it seems to have had no effect whatsoever on the elections, the 2024 elections in India. Yes, it was a popular move, especially among India's Hindus at the time in February, but that was 4 months before the election. The political importance really isn't there. On top of that, there were a lot of fears because Narendra Modi himself participated in the consecration ceremony, which I'm on record as saying from a democratic perspective was a mistake. That is, he being the prime minister of the country should not also have worn that separate hat and participated in the consecration ceremony. He chose to. That's his decision. But despite his decision to participate in the consecration ceremony, there's been no systematic role of the Ram Mandir in Indian governance because there's no institutional place for it. It's even different from, say, the United Kingdom, where the Westminster Abbey, plays a ceremonial role in the British state. So even the United Kingdom, which is a secular country, which is Western, which is progressive, all these kind of adjectives, the religious institution of Westminster Abbey plays a larger role in the state than any temple, including the Ram Mandir, plays in the Indian state. And so fears that this would create some kind of theocratic connection to state, I think those are wildly overblown, completely unfounded, precisely because the influence is not political. The influence is social. It's about the construction of the nation of India, not the construction of the Indian state and state institutions.